Hey everybody, welcome back to Life Under Deborah's Palm, where if you didn't kind of figure it out from the title of this video, my mom has indeed died, hence the final update on her. She died about 3 weeks ago, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about how she died and a lot of what I saw and heard from the folks that were caring from her in the facility. So, as you all know, my mom was like all crazy back in February and weird, and they couldn't kind of get a grip on her, and she was really weird. She ended up refusing to take all her medications, and honestly, once she got off them all, it was like she was fine. I don't know if there was some mixture that was creating the issue, who knows. But then she went along and she did end up getting COVID, and much to my surprise, for sure, she lived to tell about it and really was no worse or better than anyone else. And I would have really bet anything that that would have taken her out, but it didn't. So I went to visit her, I think it was the very end of June, maybe the 25th or something like that. It was a Thursday or a Friday. She was perfectly fine, and the following Wednesday I got a phone call from the nurse practitioner, and she said, you know, there's been a real big change in your mom. Her vitals are garbage, and there is something going around the facility, and it wasn't COVID, it was like a respiratory sinus thing, and they were all hacking and coughing all over the place when I was there. Well, my mom caught it, and it turned to pneumonia in 5 days since I had seen her. Not surprising, and when I moved my mom in, I did really tell them she probably won't die of dementia. She will probably die of pneumonia. That just was her medical history. So, you know, she said to me, this is the deal, and she has a bunch of directives and the DNRs and all that stuff, and what do you want to do? And I went up and visited her to see how she was doing, and she was really not good. And I kind of knew she wasn't going to recover from it. I could have had it treated, but I opted not to for a few reasons. I could tell it was pretty advanced. I've been down this road with her before, only now she has dementia, and they don't know that they need to cough and clear their lungs. So if their body doesn't actually kind of force them to cough, they don't clear themselves out. She had her wishes and what she wanted were all set, and she did not want any of that. So we decided to let her go, and it took about 3 days, and she really didn't suffer, and she went very peacefully. And she, typical my mom. So she died on a Saturday, and I went that morning to see how she was doing and what had happened overnight, and I left, and my uncle and my aunt had come up to see her, and right after, I think it was right after they left, not 15-20 minutes later, she died, which sounds about right for my mother, because she would be like, don't want to bother anybody, don't we need anybody being here when I die. The staff was with her, you know, the aides and stuff, but the nurse practitioner called me, and this is going to kind of bring me to my next point. The nurse practitioner called, and she said to me, I have news. And I said, is she gone? And she said, yes. And I said, well, thank you, Jesus. And she said, she kind of laughed and said, you know what? She said, I obviously in that line of business, I make a lot of these phone calls where elderly people had died, and not unexpectedly. And she said to me, and this is what I heard over and over, I knew this wasn't going to be a big deal for you when I called and told you. I spend a lot of time tiptoeing around people, trying to tell them how their elderly parent has died, and they just don't handle it well. And she goes, you were totally different. You're like, in reality, you had a good attitude about it. You understood the whole thing. And the truth is, she was 87 years old with advanced dementia. And the thing is, people still don't get this, and that's why I'm telling you. Our society really has a difficult time with death for some reason, and I heard it over and over. You know, I just told you the nurse practitioner story. I talked to the nurses when I had got there Saturday morning, and one of them said to me, you know, as we had the conversation, and I said, she's 87, I mean, what, she's not going to get better, what's waiting for her? And he said, I wish that we could have you talk to other people in this position, because you would be stunned at what we're asked to do in late stage dementia to keep people alive. And I talked to somebody else in the facility who their opinion was, and they had seen this as well, and they said, you know, I don't know, as a society, do we just not have faith in anything anymore? You know, my mom was a Jesus freak forever, like my whole life, and so I already knew what she believed, where she was going, and how it was all going to work out. And so I was completely fine with it. So was my brother. I get to the funeral home. The funeral director starts telling me stories, and he says, you know, I had a family in here, and it was a parent, and the parent had died, and I think they were like 102 or 103, super old. Said the kids were all in their 70s. And he said they got here and they were like crying hysterically. They couldn't even answer the questions to fill out the information to plan the funeral. They were a disaster. And I looked at him and said, did they think she was just never going to die? He goes, I don't know. He said they had nothing planned. No one had ever had a conversation about last wishes. Nothing. Like, I don't know. Everybody's going on forever, I guess. And it's, you know, there was a thing in the paper here locally years back, and they were talking about how parents or how children are having a very difficult time with that now. And there was a woman who, in the story, 97 years old. Her daughter was 72 or something like that. And she said, they're at the doctor's office, and the lady says to the doctor, can you tell my daughter that I am not going to live forever? The daughter didn't want to hear it and starts flipping out in the doctor's office. And the doctor said he sees this a lot now. And so I'm here to tell you, number one, the best thing you can do is know the wishes of the person who's sick, dementia or not, whoever you're dealing with as we age. What are their wishes? My mother wanted no artificial means of anything, and that was fine. But that's what she wanted, and that helps you in your decision making. You won't question yourself. Another thing is you need to look at, what are you keeping them alive for? What is their quality of life? Are they going to get better? Unless they're 35 years old with a young family or something, if we're talking about elderly people, and especially dementia, they're going to get worse. I knew what was coming. They're going to get worse. What are you saving them for? Who are you saving them for? Tough question. But I'm also going to throw this in here. This happens very often. When it comes to parents, and there's a bunch of siblings, and one of them ultimately ends up doing the majority of it, those who have been out of town and kind of detached from the day-to-day caregiving will have a much more difficult time, usually, not always, but they often have a more difficult time letting the whole process play out. They just aren't there to see the decline. And so they don't realize how far it's gone. It just is how it is. And sometimes they don't believe you caregivers that they're as bad as you say they are. Those things happen, and they often have a harder time letting go because they really aren't here to see it. So don't be surprised if that happens. And the very last thing I'm going to talk about is, people had said to me, and granted, I'll put this disclaimer out here, we're all different when it comes to death and dying and grief, but I had more than one person say to me, oh, now you can grieve your mother. And I thought, you're kidding, right? As I said, we're all different, but I'll be honest with you, in a disease like this, the grieving for me was every time my mother couldn't do something. So she would get the mail. She couldn't differentiate between junk mail and regular mail. She couldn't figure out how to use her microwave. She couldn't figure out how to turn the heat on and off and the air conditioner and switch things over. The phone was baffling to her. She was just, you know, every time you watch them lose something, for me, every time I watched my mom lose something, it was just a reminder of the cruelty and the harshness of the disease. What they lose, they're not going to get back. They're not getting back. So however bad it is today, no, in 6 months or 2 months or next week, it's going to be worse. And that's not unusual in dementia, where people grieve. Those who caretake will grieve as they lose, sorry, truck, as they lose their abilities and their reasoning and all those things. And that was definitely me. I truly was not sad when my mom died. It was harder to watch her live the way she was living than to let her go. Again, that's just me. But that's the end of this update, and I hope you all are having a great summer.